Right. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Really delighted. Hope you had a fantastic lunch. It was lovely to see those of you sitting outside. It looked very pleasant. So welcome back to Plenary 2. I'm Rosemary McLean, one of the NICEC Fellows, and I've got the pleasure of chairing this session with the panel here. And this topic, addressing burnout to build sustainable careers and prosperity for all, is a clearly very important one. And we've already heard this morning quite a bit about this already. It matters because if people aren't feeling well, they're out of work and they want to be in work, or they're in jobs that aren't working for them, they're dissatisfied in the work, that has such an impact on productivity, engagement. It's a massive topic. And in my work with the Career Innovation Company, I do a lot of work with employers. And I think, as already been said, a lot of employers do some fantastic work around wellness initiatives, mindfulness, also first aiders, all sorts of things. But actually, I think it doesn't always tackle the fundamental problems, that it's actually people's work that causes people stress, which is a career challenge. People having the wrong boss, people not doing work they enjoy, people not using their skills. And Kate just did a really great workshop just before lunch on this topic as well. And she reminded me of the definition from Gallup on career wellness, which is doing things you enjoy every day. So if you're not doing that, then there's a good chance you're going to be unwell. So what you're going to hear from the panel, you're going to hear some more evidence of the consequences of burnout. You're going to hear more about some of the stark statistics about people being out of work. And you're also going to hear about perhaps how we can think about this from an individual perspective. And as you're listening, I'm going to encourage you to really think about, okay, given where my domain of practice or work is, how can what I do impact on this down the line? And we're going to have 3 quite short, sharp inputs, and then we're going to have some discussions on the table with peers, and then we're going to have a plenary. So we've got 45 minutes. It's quite a quick, fast-paced session, but I would encourage you to, as we're working through, to be thinking about, okay, what does this mean in terms of where I'm working? So, without further ado, I'm going to invite the first contributor to the panel. So I'm delighted to welcome, she's going to do the walk of, come on the stage. I'm going to welcome Sally Wilson, who's, you can see from her job title, Health and Workplace Health and Wellbeing Research. She really knows a lot on this topic. So Sally, welcome.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Rosemary. Thank you for inviting me. So, as Rosemary said, I'm not a person who works in a careers-related profession, but my day job is actually as a researcher, and I lead our programme of work at the Institute for Employment Studies in workplace health and wellbeing research. So, IES is a not-for-profit research organisation. We do a broad range of work. We're quite small, but we cover a lot of areas, mostly in relation to HR policy, government policy in areas like skills, education, health, disadvantage. So I'm just going to give you a bit of flavour of where we're coming from at IES. So we produce a lot of research for a lot of different types of clients. So some of them, the areas we've looked at recently has been looking at young people's mental health in the workplace for the Health Foundation. We've done work on job design and a programme of work in the Home Office that was about making people's jobs better and making working life better, that in turn addressed sickness absence and poor engagement, in particular department there. We've looked at sectors and particular issues within sectors. So, for example, looking at the mental health of construction workers. So every sector has its own issues. So I've personally done quite a lot of work for the rail industry, looking at some of the jobs where there are challenges for people's health, such as train drivers and engineers on the railways. And we've also done a lot of work on the role of line managers. We're coming at this with quite a lot of knowledge as an organisation, so I'm going to try and relay some of that to you in a few short minutes. So the case for action, and this is in relation to work and ill health, I said to Rosemary I'd sort of do a bit of scene setting in terms of policy. So any government that is in place after this week is really faced with a bit of a epidemic in terms of worklessness and ill health. So much as it's not always helpful, I think, to take an age-focused approach to looking at research issues, because I don't want to stereotype, but actually if you're looking at reasons for being out of work or outside the labour market, it does, I think, make sense to break down what it looks like by age. And this is quite a useful set of data from the ONS explaining how people are currently occupied, or why people are outside the labour market in different age groups. And I think a lot of you will have heard this figure bandied around about 2.6 million people being outside the labour market in this country who are of working age but can't work for health reasons, or people who say that that's the main reason that they're unable to work. So this is really breaking down that 2.6 million, which I think is actually probably risen to 2.8, I think, since this graph was put together. So it's a growing issue. So I think that the blocks that we're interested in here are in relation to the grey blocks here. So I think sort of starting at the bottom and looking at older workers, that is obviously where you would expect a lot of kind of chronic conditions to kind of set in and start to become reasons for people to come out of the labour market. And then looking at the middle years, obviously that not so much, and there's an awful lot of yellow area there, which reflects people who've got responsibilities and staying at home because of family. And then in that younger age group, I suppose the key thing to note there is people are outside the labour market in that younger 18 to 24 age group, mainly because they're studying. But what you can see is a small but quite significant rise in that grey block there between 2019 and 2023. I think it reflects, and I think both in the younger and age group, reflects this jump we're seeing in people out of work due to ill health reasons that's happened between the pandemic and now. I think quite importantly, a lot of people who were out of work before the pandemic or just have not gone back. There's a lot we don't know about this data. We don't know exactly how it breaks down. We don't know an awful lot about those people's health conditions, for example. But what we do know is there's almost an epidemic of mental health issues among young people, whereas if you're looking at the older age groups, it's the kind of chronic conditions you'd expect that are becoming more prevalent, like cardiovascular issues, diabetes, pain conditions, musculoskeletal disorders, cancer, things like that. So I think it does make sense to think about health in relation to age, because you can't really address these things without getting to grips with the issues within different groups. So as I say, it's a case for action with whatever government we find ourselves with at the end of the week. So this is kind of flipping this round a bit, and it's saying this is looking at people who are this is looking at people with long-term conditions or illnesses, and it's looking at the proportions within those groups that are in or out of work. So this again is taking you from 2013 up to almost now in 2023. You've got a rise in people with long-term conditions and illnesses, as I say, often driven by those chronic conditions I've just listed, but also mental health conditions becoming more prevalent in all age groups, especially the young. I think what you can see there is that there is what we call a disability or ill health gap there. So we've got quite a lot of people, for example, just looking at these. So in terms of thinking about the proportions of people who are unwell or have a disability who aren't working, it's rising quite significantly, but also in terms of the actual number, that's rising significantly also. So we've definitely got a disability ill health gap there. We've got people who are struggling to find work for health-related reasons. I think one thing that I think is really important to reflect on here is if you're thinking about the blue block, the employed block, and you're thinking about the economically inactive and unemployed blocks, you might think, well, is it the case that the people in the unemployed groups or economically inactive groups, do they have more severe conditions, for example, or do they have disabilities that are more challenging to combine with work? But I think it's sort of worth questioning that and thinking, or in some of these cases, it might be the nature of the employment that people are in. So is it that the people who have the conditions that are in work, is that because they have a better employer? It's not necessarily because their health issues or disability issues are less severe. So I think it's worth flipping it around and just thinking about, what is it about these people? Not just what is it about these people, what is it about their employers? What is it about their profession? And thinking about the contextual issues that might be driving that. So I wanted to say a few words about the legacy of the pandemic that you will all be aware of, but I think it makes sense just to bring some of these things together. So it's been a shock in most workplaces to our ways of working, particularly office-based jobs and jobs that can be done in a mobile way. For some people, it's provided an opportunity for more inclusive working, and in terms of health implications of remote and hybrid working, they can be advantageous for some people, less so for others. And it's created a bit of division, I think, between people in professions where working at home is a possibility and those professions where it isn't. So, you might, I think sort of teachers, for example, and people in the NHS are really feeling it now that not only are they working very, very hard, but they don't have the options that other people do. It's changed the way we view health at work. So I think it's worth remembering that for the very first time during the pandemic, people actually started to view the office environment as a threat. And for some people, depending on their health status or perhaps the frail or vulnerable state of relatives or people who might be at home, the office environment is still a threat. It's a potential place for infection, and we've never, ever really thought about the workplace in that way before. We're still left with unprecedented levels of sick leave after the pandemic as well. It's left a lasting impact. And the legacy, in more positive terms, it has educated us about the challenges people face. So people in clinically extremely vulnerable groups, they had to disclose to their employer for the first time that they belonged to those groups. So it provided an opportunity, I suppose, for people to disclose and talk about conditions that might have been difficult to do that before. It's helped us understand challenges of carers, people caring for vulnerable adults and children. And I think there's more knowledge and understanding of people with chronic conditions and the challenges that they're presented by in relation to work. So not just long COVID, but people with other conditions that we might not really have thought about much before. There's been an impact of lockdown on young people. That's something that over these 2 days will come up a lot, and the implications for their mental health. There's greater awareness, and that's led to more self-report of mental health disorder among the population, and that in turn has led to more pressure on services. Again, there's a bit more openness, I think, about things like discussion about things like neurodiversity, comorbidity with mental health conditions. Again, these are things we're talking about more, but there are pressures on the health system, as I've just said, and those have repercussions in an employment context. So I just wanted to say some things about some opportunities. So more conversations about health at work are taking place. I think internal policies in most workplaces are improving. So although things might not have changed much on the ground, I think IS, we're seeing HR departments much quicker to put policies together in relation to things like menopause or caring responsibilities, or policies in connection with various aspects of parenthood, policies in reaction to not just disabilities that are obvious, but more hidden health conditions such as mental health conditions. There's more appreciation of the role of line managers and an appetite to learn what works. We're also seeing that employees in general are more demanding of employers. So I'm thinking about, interviews. Employees are much more likely to say now to, what are you going to do about mental health, or what occupational health support does your organisation provide? And then I just wanted to finish with a slide, and there's a lot in it, but I think it's just good to consider, well, what should employers be doing? And something we talk about a lot at IAS is what they should be doing to prevent ill health at work. So there's all those basic things about hazardous substances and falls from heightened physical risks at work. But there is also a duty of care that employers have in relation to psychosocial health. They should be doing risk assessments in relation to stress. Many don't. Employers should also be there to respond if someone is in a health crisis for any reason. So that might be provision of employee assistance programs, bereavement counselling, things like that. And then support should be there for people with disabilities. And of course, getting people back into the labour market who are outside work for health reasons and disability reasons, getting the right reasonable adjustments in place is obviously really, really important. But I think if you were to just put a big circle around all this, I think what subsumes all of this is the need to have fair work, good quality, quality, fulfilling work, work with fair pay. I'm, as somebody who's a work and health researcher, I'm not big on wellbeing interventions. I think they can be kind of nice to haves, but I think fundamentally people need work that is good for them, that is where they have basic workplace rights, where they have some autonomy. So, you know, I suppose I just close that with just urging a bit of caution about wellbeing add-ons, and I think just putting the emphasis back on the job itself. Thanks very much. Thank you.
So thanks very much, Sally. And I like the glimmer of that, the openness about people talking about illness and so forth being really progressive. So now I want to invite Deidre Bowen to join us. Deidre is the Director of National Programs with the Mental Health in the Workplace. So welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Deidre and I'm the Director of National Programmes for an organisation called Mental Health UK, and I'm going to talk to you today around my own personal experience of burnout in a previous role, not at Mental Health UK, and some of the things that employees and employers can do to support their workforce out there. So I want to take you back to the pandemic, and it's already been mentioned that our lives changed dramatically during that time, with the lines between work and home life being blurred. And earlier this year, in January of this year, Mental Health UK undertook its first report, which will be repeated yearly, around burnout, because we'd heard with the organisations that we'd worked with, and a lot of corporate organisations who had said that burnout was on the rise for them, and we wanted to dig a little bit deeper underneath that. And there's 3 stats out of those 4 up there that I'd really like to draw your attention to, because I think they really paint a picture. So the first is that 90% of adults experienced high or extreme stress in the last year. On top of that, 1/5 of UK adults took time off work for their mental health caused by workplace stress. And the last one, that just under half said that their employer doesn't have a plan in place to support them with their mental health and prevent burnout. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience. During the pandemic in 2020, I was the CEO of a small grassroots charity. And as you can imagine, as many of us did, there was a lot of pressure from my team who needed things from me, to the trustees, to the people that we served within the community. And I definitely think that for me, it was a slow, incremental thing, and I didn't really realise it was happening until it was well upon me. Some of these words on the screen, or the word cloud, describe some of the feelings and emotions that I had at the time. And I'll probably typify this through 2 things that I think were really important. Is that I remember I had a really important report to write for a commissioner, and I was sitting at my desk and I needed to be quiet, and an email pinged through. I felt this urgency to answer it. My phone rang. I needed to know who it was. Secondly, my partner was expecting me to, of course, to be present at weekends. Physically I was, but emotionally I was somewhere else. Now I have 2 loves in my life, which are the gym and exercise. The gym and food. One has to balance the other. But I do love my food more, I'd say. But these things became just mundane, and I was just going through the motions. And how I would say, really sum it up, is that inner critical voice became all dominating in me. And I felt a sense of overwhelm, plus just an emptiness, like nothing brought me joy anymore. And I'm pleased to say that I did find my way through that period of time. It was around Christmas of 2020, and I took some time off work for the Christmas period, and I actually ended up taking off 3 weeks because I didn't feel well enough to go back at the time. And I now know the symptoms and signs, because I'd say this is something that I personally have to constantly check. And I think the thing that for me was the most important was putting my boundaries back in place and shutting off from work, and actually finding purpose in work again, rather than it being something that you're just slogging through each day. What is your reason for doing this, and making that, putting that at the forefront. So a couple of things which we found in workplaces can really impact well-being as alongside burnout is absenteeism. So we classify that as staying away from work without good reason. And there can be a number of things that can contribute to this. Of course, burnout, but also low employee engagement. And that's again coming back to purpose. If people don't know why they're in work, they can't connect with it. That lack of flexible working, where people think, well, I could go somewhere else and I'll be here, but I'm not really present. I'm not really here because I'm not being given any flexibility that works for me. And that lack of mental health support. So how visible is it to employees that there is mental health support out there? Is there a stigma attached to this? Do line managers, do the senior leaders within an organisation talk about it? The other thing is presenteeism. So that's attending work, so being there, but not really being productive. So really just going through the motions. And the thing that we found at Mental Health UK that really contribute to this is the culture of the organisation. So the culture means having policies and procedures as part of it, but are those hidden somewhere? Are they brought to the forefront? Do employees know how they can access the support that they need? Again, do line managers talk to them? Again, workload. We all have busy periods of time in our working life, but if that is sustained and there's no let up and it's short deadlines and you don't have chance to recharge your batteries, it can have an adverse effect on your mental health. And lastly, that mental health stigma. So if people don't feel comfortable talking to their line manager for fear of being looked over for promotion or just not being given those opportunities or being judged for that, that will have an effect on their well-being. So there are some practical things that employees can do to support their well-being. And I put a caveat to this that I think it is important that it's both employees and employers that bear some responsibility, but I would say this is a list that find out what works for you and put that in place as best you can. But there is a responsibility on employers as well. I think the first thing I'd say is putting mental health at the heart of your strategic objectives. And what I mean by that is making sure that it speaks to, so every time you're looking at something that you're thinking about the mental health aspect through it. How is your organisation doing compared to others? How do your employees feel about being in work? It's important that we benchmark and speak, even if we don't really want to hear what they might have to say, and there might need to be a cultural shift. Signposting, and what I mean by that is not signposting, just passing someone on, it's taking them through and getting them the support that they need and knowing that you're there to give it to them as their line manager. And role modelling. I was given a great piece of advice in a previous role by a manager that I've took with me through the years. And she said to me, how do you think your team feel if you're sending an email at 10 o'clock at night? And I hadn't really thought of it like that. I just thought, well, I just want to send, I've thought of it and I want to send it. No, it was sending a message that my team may think that they have to do the same, or that's what's expected of them. So it's really important as senior leaders in particular and line managers that we role model the behaviour that we want to see in others, that we take those breaks and we prioritise ourselves on occasions when we need to, and that we share our experiences as I do within my organisation and externally around burnout. Line managers play a pivotal role in this, as I've alluded to many times throughout. It's really important that they have access to training that can support employees with their mental health. And there's three main reasons behind this. That preventative signs, so they can spot signs and symptoms of poor mental health before an employee perhaps has to take time off work, or to get them the support that they need early on, so that they understand the mechanisms that are in place to support employees when they do find themselves struggling with their mental health. And they also have that confidence to have those conversations with employees. I think one thing that I've noticed throughout the years, probably throughout the last 10 years, is that we're seeing more a skill that's often underrated, which I think is so important in the workplace. Emotional intelligence is being asked for by employers. And I'm pleased to see this, because that is one of those things that if you can develop that skill will help you to support yourself and your employees as well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Deidre, for bringing your personal perspectives on this as well and sharing your story. And I think it just served to reinforce how awful it feels to be in work that's not good for you and your relationship with work. So thank you for that and all the practicals. Now, finally, we're going to hear from Cathy Brown. And Cathy's going to share a little bit, I think, delving a bit more into that aspect of it. And then we're going to have some discussion on the tables. So stay tuned.
Right, so I'm a psychologist and I run my own business, and I'm a career coach and I undertake research. And so what I'd like to do today is bring some of that to bear to this discussion and this topic that we're exploring. And I'm going to take an individual psychological perspective, and the lens that I'm going to bring is the theory of resonance. I don't know whether you've heard about this, but it's something that I was introduced to at a previous NISEC seminar by Rita Buell, and it's something that I wanted to share with you today. So I would like to introduce that theory and then move that theory into the context of work, into career resonance, and then finish off by exploring how can we cultivate career resonance. And these are my thoughts, but I would be really interested in your thoughts about this. It is something that is really relevant, and I do believe that resonance has a key part to play in this discussion. And as Rosa said in his latest book, burnout and resonance they're strongly connected, so it's totally relevant for us. So if we move into the first area, what do we actually mean by resonance? So it's good to think about this, isn't it? Think about what comes to mind. And as Rosa said, all humans are resonant beings. So we are born resonant, and I think that's a really important point. If we then sidestep and think about science, and we think about we are, in fact, as human beings, we are energy in vibration. We each have our own unique energy signature. So if we think, okay, that's fine. So what do we really mean by that? What does that mean for resonance? Let's pick up on Rosa's thinking here and connect into this. Because what he says is that we can have a resonant relationship with work, with activity, with hobbies, with locations, with people. So this is relevant for us. And if we think, okay, so what does that look like? Because we may know what it feels like, but if we get to the facts, what it actually means is it's when we are moved by something and we are wanting to take action. It's something where we then respond. So we are touched emotionally by something and we act. We are then, something shifts in that moment. And then what's interesting, it's elusive, which is almost then thinking, well, how do we then create resonance? But I think it is something that we can be aware of and we can bring to bear in this discussion. This is relevant to us because in a capitalist society, we have to grow, accelerate, innovate to stand still. And we don't even realize it, but it's always there. And I think that sense of what is a good job, and we talked about the plimsoll line being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, that happens to all of us all of the time, to the point we don't even realize it. And it's exhausting. It can be absolutely exhausting to the point that the world is moving too quickly for us to sit with anything. And so we burn out. This is what happens. We are pushing ourselves. We are out of sync with ourselves. We are out of sync with each other, and it can lead to burning. We disconnect from ourselves, and we actually disconnect from our place in the world. This is fundamental, and it can lead to the absence of resonance. So a capitalist society burns out resonance. Something that we're born with is burnt out of us. And it's something that we may experience from time to time. So what is the impact of that? The impact is we burn out, as we're saying. We can feel alienated, we can feel cold, we can feel absent from each other. We can feel at the extreme depressed. We can feel a sense of meaningless. And I know, Deidre, you mentioned that about your own personal example there. So let's think about what is the opposite here. The opposite is when we feel emotionally touched. We feel energized. We've got more energy at the end of the day. We feel joy. We have a sense of meaning. We feel hopeful. We feel safe. We are supported. So, as Salak says, a resonant relationship with the world allows us to feel safe and supported. So if we now take that and bring it into the world of our world of work, I spent some time thinking about this. So these are my thoughts, and I'd be really interested to know how this is for you. So introducing career resonance, what is that? What could it be? It's when we feel positive emotion and joy. We have a sense of energy. We feel meaning and fulfillment in what we do. And if we link back to Rosa, meaning is born when the wire of resonance begins to vibrate. We know that. And so I'm going to finish off with thinking about how can we help, being really practical with this elusive notion, how can we be practical? How can we help clients to foster career resonance? What can we do so that we help people, our clients, feel connected to their place in the world? And I believe there is a number of things that we can do. And the first, we have to meet our clients where they're at. That's the important thing. And the first step, when we are burnt out, we need to reconnect with ourselves. And we need to do some work on that. We can learn from some of the leading global organizations about how we do that. We may need to work with other practitioners to support us in this, depending on the level of burnout. As well as reconnecting with ourselves, we actually need to reconnect with each other. We need to give, we need to be part of community. This is a long-term way of living. It leads to different hormones being released. I don't know whether you've come across the happiness and pleasure research. This is part of that. We can make a difference. And then if we get really specific and think about work, if we have 10 minutes with a client, how can I help people to really help them begin to reconnect with their hearts, reconnect with themselves? What are those key questions? What brings us joy? What lifts us, our hearts? This is important. And then if we have more time with clients, there are methodologies and approaches that are research-based that can help us to bring purpose and fulfillment into our work. And I know CCS runs a program, the CDI runs a program. There are many other programs, but they are there. And so this isn't for a privileged few. This is for all of us. We are born resonant. It's about regaining that for ourselves and for our clients. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Cathy. I'm sure that's given you a lot of food for thought. So we've sort of heard, I guess, the bigger picture around some of the stark figures from Sally there. We've heard, Deidre's story and also how Deidre is looking at burnout in the workplace. Now we've heard from Cathy, I think, thinking about it from, a deeper level of how, as an individual, we connect with this. So what we want to do now, and for those people online as well, we want to give you a chance to just discuss in pairs, some of your thinking about what you've heard, and actually to just think about your domain of practice or research, whatever it is, where you work. How can we address some of these challenges and some of the opportunities that we're looking at here with that link between careers and wellness? And what we'd love it is if you could try and pinpoint 2 things and put them on the Post-its in front of you, because then we can collect the wisdom in the room and the ideas of the room. And if you can put your name on that, even better, so we can collect. So I'm going to give 10 minutes and then we're going to have a final plenary session where you can ask questions or make comments to the panel. So how does that sound? 10 minutes from now, I'll keep an eye on the time, just a bit of a pair discussion on your table. Okay? Okay, everyone, time is run out on us, I'm afraid. So if I can just bring you all back to the room, as it were, we can probably squeeze in just a couple of minutes if you've got something burning you'd like to share from the floor, or if you have a question or a comment for the panel or anyone in the panel. So do raise your hand if you would like to say something at this point. So who would like to kick us off? It could be something you've struck you today that's been really interesting so far, or something you're thinking about. Okay, thank you at the back. And when you speak, can you just briefly say who you are so everyone knows who's talking?
Hello, my name is Eva and I come from Prague, and we have two issues here. We think that the well-being, including mental health, should be an integral part of lifelong guidance. I'm not saying career guidance, I'm using the term lifelong guidance because it's broader than just the work. And it should be accessible to everybody. And the second thought is that the idea of resonance resonated with us, and we thought that we should help people to develop the skill of resonance, and we thought it's got a holistic concept, so it's not only work. So we should not only focus on how to resonate relating to our work, but just stop in our life and reflect on what moves us when we are happy. So if we just focus only on work, it's going to shrink our life somehow. So the holistic perspective is really important.
Thank you so much. So really practical thoughts there, bringing the lifelong learning back into early stages, people thinking about this, and resonance has obviously struck a chord and seems relevant. Anyone else want to say something or have a question or a comment? Right?
Just say who you are. Hazel from University of Birmingham. In our little group, we were just talking a little bit about working with young people in universities and in schools, and how there's that opportunity with the fact that they've got a different understanding around what is and isn't acceptable. But then there's the kind of mismatch with that sometimes with leadership within organisations and workplaces where they haven't necessarily got that same kind of expectation of what they should expect from their staff. So there's a bit of a kind of generational gap there necessarily about like how things are changing and expectations of new staff coming in, but also, you know, what leadership thinks should be expected from their staff.
So something about communication in organisations and just really laying that out. And I think that openness that you were talking about, Sally, about being open to talk about what's going on and mental health, physical health as well, just creating more trust and psychological safety, I guess, as well. Anyone else? Yes.
Hello, Nikki Moore, University of Derby. We were thinking about the mental health issues of people that are self-employed or lone workers, and wondered how we would be able to work with them to sort of point them in the right direction of mental health support, you know, particular communities that might need that more than others.
Yeah, it's a good point, Nikki, isn't it? Because if you're self-employed, you don't have the employer to sort of look after you anyway in that sense. So it's a really good point to be thinking about. Michael, are there any questions from our online participants, just in case? We know, just in case anyone wants to raise anything. But I think we've got time for maybe one more from the floor because we've got workshops waiting.
Thank you. As a brilliant segue, I'm self-employed, so I'm open to all the sorts of discussions. One of the things that came up in our conversation was around fostering career resonance, and in particular, something that struck a chord with me was reconnecting with others. Having worked in organizations where perhaps I didn't have career resonance, now in a job where I feel like I do, it's been reconnecting with other people that has really driven forward that it's sort of confirmed that there is that career resonance. And we then started talking about how could I take that experience perhaps back into organizations to help them. And we started talking about actually how at the beginning of a recruitment process, you could be qualifying candidates based on their level of understanding of career planning and their own resonance. so that before you've even employed them, you know to what extent they're ready to manage by themselves, depending on the corporate culture, and also as part of a retention strategy and ongoing career planning internally, how important that would be to keep in mind. So especially around reconnecting with others. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a really interesting idea, actually, because it's almost looking at people's capacity to be able to work and navigate their career. If they're not ready for it, they need help, maybe. So interesting. Anything, Michael, or are we all good to wrap things up? All good. Great. Well, look, I think we have run out of time, and obviously this isn't the end, because we're going to be continuing discussing these themes all throughout the rest of today and tomorrow. But just to say a massive thank you to Sally, Deidre, and Cathy. I had a bit of a senile moment then, just for the real insights that they've shared with us today. So really appreciated. Thank you very much. I think Sally and Deidre, you're having to head off, aren't you? So if you want to have a chat with either of them, now's the time. So enjoy your workshops coming up shortly. Yeah.